I still remember the smell of burnt coffee that morning, bitter, stale, just like the mood in the office. My name's Barbara, and for 7 years, I was the kind of employee who never said no. I came early, stayed late, covered for others, even when it wasn't my job. I believed loyalty mattered, but I was about to learn how wrong I was. I worked at Linden & Rowe, a mid-sized marketing agency tucked in downtown Chicago. The kind of place that looked polished on the outside. Glass walls, modern art, and smiles for clients. But inside, it was all whispers, secrets, and survival. My boss, Catherine Doyle, was the HR director. Everyone feared her. She spoke softly, smiled faintly, but there was something cold behind her eyes, like she was always calculating what she could gain from every person she met. When I first joined, she seemed kind. She told me, "You've got potential, Barbara. You're one of the good ones." That line stuck with me. I wore it like armor for years. But one thing I didn't realize was that Catherine's praise always came before a setup. It started subtly. She'd ask me to take notes in meetings she didn't have time for. Then she'd have me send emails on her behalf. Then she started having me look over files that weren't even mine, confidential personnel records, expense reports, complaint forms. At first, I thought she trusted me. Then I realized she was making me a buffer, a shield between her and whatever shady thing she was doing, but I didn't know the half of it. One Friday afternoon, she called me into her office. Her desk was spotless as always, and she was typing something furiously when I walked in. "Barbara," she said without looking up, "do you still have access to the internal payroll system?" "Yeah," I said, "for budget summaries and reporting." She leaned back in her chair and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good. I need you to pull a few salary files for me. Discreetly." I hesitated. "For who?" "Just a few department heads," she said. "Don't worry. This is for a compliance check." Her tone was calm, but her eyes were daring me to say no. I did as she asked. I always did. That night, when I was leaving, I saw her through the glass wall of her office, scanning the files I'd printed. Her lips curved up. I remember thinking, why does she look so pleased? 2 weeks later, everything changed. I walked in one morning and the air felt heavy. People weren't talking. They were staring. Before I could even set my bag down, 2 security guards appeared beside my desk. "Barbara Hayes," one of them said, "we need you to come with us." My heart dropped. They led me to Catherine's office. She was sitting there, calm as ever, sipping from her sleek white coffee mug. "Barbara," she said, in that syrupy voice of hers, "we've received some troubling reports. It seems you've been accessing confidential payroll data without authorization." I froze. "What? You told me to?" She raised a hand. "Please, don't make this harder than it has to be." My throat tightened. "Catherine, you asked me to do that." Her lips pressed into a fake frown. "Barbara, I understand you're upset, but I have to protect this company. You violated trust. We can't ignore that." The guard stood behind me. My entire body was shaking. She was setting me up. She had used me. They escorted me out. No time to pack my things. No explanation to my coworkers. Just humiliation, whispers, and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. When the elevator doors closed, I saw Catherine through the glass. She was smiling. That smile burned into my memory. The weeks after that were a blur of disbelief. I applied for unemployment, tried to find new work, but every reference led to silence. I later found out Catherine had blacklisted me in the industry. She told other HR directors I was unethical. She destroyed my career. And the worst part? She didn't just fire me. She made it look like I'd done it to myself. For a while, I almost believed her version. almost. But then one night, I got a call from Eli, a guy who worked in IT at Linden and Rowe. We weren't close, just office friendly. He said, "Barbara, I don't know if you'll pick up, but I think you should see something." My heart started pounding. "What is it?" He lowered his voice. "There's an internal audit. Catherine's involved in something big, and your name's all over it." I felt my stomach drop. He told me that Catherine had been transferring bonuses, fake performance incentives, into her own accounts using dummy employee profiles. And to make it look legitimate, she used access logs under my name. She didn't just frame me, she built her entire scheme around me. I hung up the phone and just sat there. Every humiliation, every sleepless night, every rejection, it all flooded back. But this time, the pain hardened into something colder, revenge. Not the screaming, fiery kind. The quiet kind that moves in shadows and strikes when they least expect it. I spent the next few weeks gathering myself. Eli sent me copies of files from the audit logs. I started connecting dots, expense reports, payroll IDs, IP addresses. Every trail led back to Catherine, and she'd been doing it for over a year. I tried to report it anonymously, but corporate brushed it off. Catherine had too much influence. She played golf with the CFO, had drinks with the CEO's wife. No one would listen to disgraced Barbara Hayes. So I found another way. Through an old colleague, I learned the company was about to land a massive new client, Velcor International, a deal worth millions. Velcor's contract required a full HR, compliance certification audit before signing. If I could expose Catherine before that deal went through, she'd be untouchable no longer. I had one shot. For 3 sleepless nights, I built a report, detailed, time-stamped, cross-verified with the data Eli gave me. I made it clean, professional, impossible to ignore. And I didn't send it to Linden and Rowe. I sent it directly to Velcor's legal department. Then, silence. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then, on the 3rd day, I got an email. A single line from an anonymous address. "You've started something. Watch the news." I turned on my laptop. There it was. Headlines across the industry sites. Linden and Rowe faces investigation over payroll fraud. HR director implicated. I stared at the screen. My heart was racing, but I couldn't move. Catherine Doyle's photo was right there. The same smug smile she wore when she fired me, but this time her eyes looked terrified. And for the first time in months, I felt the weight lift off my chest. But I knew this wasn't over. People like Catherine don't just crumble. They fight back. And I had a feeling she was about to. They say revenge feels sweet, but when it first hits, it feels like fire. Wild, unpredictable, and dangerous if you don't control it. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. Catherine's name was plastered across every industry headline. Payroll fraud investigation, financial misconduct, breach of ethics. She had been suspended pending inquiry. Linden and Rowe's PR team was in full panic mode. Velcor International immediately froze their deal. The very contract Catherine had been gloating about for months. I should have felt vindicated, but I didn't. Not yet. Because I knew people like her. They always find a way to land on their feet. 3 days later, I got another call from Eli. "Barbara," he whispered, "you need to be careful." My stomach tightened. Why? "She's saying the audit report was fabricated. She's telling everyone you sent it to Velcor to sabotage her." My chest went cold. "She's what?" "She's got friends in high places," Eli said. "She's already lawyering up. And get this, her lawyer filed a defamation claim against you." For a moment, the world tilted sideways. Catherine was trying to make me the villain again. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment felt alive. Every buzz of my phone made my heart race. Then, around 1 a.m., my email pinged. The subject line read, "Cease and desist. Unauthorized disclosure of confidential information." It was official. Catherine Doyle versus Barbara Hayes. She was suing me. My hands trembled as I read the email. It was from her attorney, threatening immediate legal consequences unless I withdrew all statements and issued a public apology. A public apology. For telling the truth. I slammed my laptop shut and sat there in the dark, shaking. I could almost hear Catherine's voice in my head. "You should have stayed quiet, Barbara." But I wasn't that same naive woman anymore. The next morning, I went to the one place I'd avoided since I got fired, downtown Chicago's Employment Tribunal office. I filed a whistleblower claim, and I didn't just file it against Linden and Rowe. I filed it personally against Catherine Doyle. Eli backed me up. He provided server logs, timestamps, and emails. Every shred of evidence pointed to her. When I left that building, I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. And anger, when focused, becomes power. 2 weeks later, Catherine's attorney contacted me again, this time a different tone. "Ms. Hayes," he said, "our client would like to discuss a settlement." Settlement. That word tasted like poison. She wasn't apologizing. She was buying silence. I said, "Tell your client I don't want her money. I want her truth." He paused. "Then you're making a very dangerous mistake." Maybe I was, but it was the only kind of mistake I could live with. The company's investigation turned public. Reporters dug deeper. Employees started whispering. Then I got another call from Eli, late at night, voice trembling. "Barbara," he said, "you need to see this. It's bigger than we thought." He sent me a file, a dump of Catherine's personal emails that he'd stumbled across during the internal IT review. And what I saw made my blood run cold. Catherine wasn't just siphoning company funds. She was covering up harassment complaints against one of the executives, deleting records, silencing employees. There were payouts, fake signatures, entire cases buried. This wasn't just corporate theft. It was rot, systemic and cruel. And Catherine was the spider in the center of the web. I didn't sleep that night. I read every email, every note, every fake apology she'd sent to victims on behalf of the company. I felt sick. It wasn't just about me anymore. She'd destroyed other people's lives, quietly, efficiently, and without remorse. I stared at my reflection in the window and whispered, "You're going down, Catherine." The next morning, I called the Ledger, a major business news outlet. I sent them everything, all of it. At first, the reporter hesitated. "Do you realize the risk you're taking?" "Yes," I said. "But it's the only way she stops." They ran the story 3 days later. Whistleblower exposes HR corruption at Linden and Rowe. Cover-up scandal unfolds. Catherine's name was everywhere. She denied everything on camera, her voice trembling, her eyes hollow. But the email spoke louder than she ever could. Then something strange happened. I started getting messages from people, employees, contractors, even interns, thanking me. They'd all been hurt by Catherine's decisions. Some fired unjustly, others silenced after filing complaints. They called me brave. But bravery wasn't what I felt. It was exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones after fighting too long. Still, for the first time, I felt seen. A week later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Barbara Hayes?" a man's voice said. "This is Detective Marshall, Chicago Financial Crimes Division. We're conducting an official investigation into Catherine Doyle. I'd like to ask you a few questions." I exhaled. "Of course. Anything you need." He paused. "You did the right thing coming forward. But you should know, she's trying to flee. Flee? She's been moving money offshore. We're tracking her accounts. I sat there, speechless. Even as her empire burned, she was still scheming. But karma, I was learning, is patient. And it always finishes what it starts. A few days later, Catherine held a press conference. I watched the live stream on my laptop. She looked pale, smaller somehow, standing behind the podium with cameras flashing. Her voice quivered as she said, "These accusations are false. I've dedicated my career to fairness and integrity." I laughed, bitterly. Then something unbelievable happened. One of the reporters interrupted her. "Mrs. Doyle," he said, "can you explain the offshore accounts linked to your husband's company in the Cayman Islands?" Her face drained of color. The crowd gasped. That question came straight from the documents I'd leaked to the Ledger. They had followed the money, and they'd found everything. The press swarmed her with questions. She stammered, panicked, trying to walk off stage as cameras followed her every move. It was chaos. Beautiful, poetic chaos. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by my window, watching the city lights. For months, I'd been living in fear. But now, I could finally breathe. Then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I hesitated, then answered. "Barbara?" a trembling voice said. "It's Catherine." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just listened to her breathing, uneven, desperate. "What do you want?" I finally said. Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I scoffed. "You framed me. You ruined lives." "I was protecting myself," she cried. "You don't understand. These men, the executives, they made me do it. I had no choice." "No choice?" I whispered. "You always had a choice. You just picked power over people." There was silence, then a soft, broken sound, like a sob. "Barbara," she said, her voice shaking. "They're going to destroy me." "Good," I said quietly. "Now you know how it feels." Then I hung up. 2 days later, the news broke. Again, Catherine Doyle arrested, facing federal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. I stared at the headline, numb. It was over. Truly over. Or so I thought. Because sometimes, when karma finishes one story, it starts another. A week after her arrest, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single envelope, and inside that, a flash drive. No note. No explanation. Just a file labeled "The Board." I hesitated before opening it. But curiosity won again. It was a series of recordings, board meetings, phone calls, internal memos, all implicating Linden and Rowe's top executives in Catherine's crimes. She hadn't acted alone. She'd just taken the fall for all of them. And now, someone wanted me to know. I sat there, staring at my screen, pulse pounding. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. The kind that never makes the evening news. I closed the laptop slowly and whispered to myself, "You started this, Catherine, but I'm going to finish it." And deep down, I knew. Part of her wanted me to. When you fight monsters long enough, you start to see their shadows everywhere. After Catherine's arrest, I thought I'd finally be able to move on. Sleep through the night, maybe start rebuilding the career she stole from me. But life doesn't tie up its loose ends that easily. Because when I opened that flash drive, I realized Catherine wasn't the end. She was just the beginning. The folder labeled "The Board" contained a dozen recordings. Each one sounded like it had been captured secretly. Phone calls, internal Zoom meetings, snippets of conversations between Linden and Rowe executives. In one of them, I recognized a voice I hadn't heard in months, Gerald Lang, the company's CEO. He was talking to someone named Harper. "Catherine's panicking," he said. "She's threatening to talk. If she does, we all go down." Harper replied, "We'll keep her quiet. Just handle the press until this blows over." I froze. We all go down. They weren't victims of Catherine. They were her partners. She'd been protecting them. And now that she was gone, they were scrambling to bury the truth. And somehow, she'd left all of this for me. I couldn't tell if it was guilt, desperation, or one last power play from Catherine. Maybe she knew I'd do what she couldn't. But one thing was certain. This drive was dangerous. If the board found out I had it, they'd come for me next. So I backed up everything on a secure cloud, encrypted it, and hid the original flash drive in a safe deposit box downtown. Then I called Eli. When he answered, I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Barbara, please tell me you're done with this." "I wish I was," I said, "but it's bigger than Catherine. The whole board's involved. They covered up fraud. Maybe worse." He sighed. "Then you need to go to the feds. Now." "I will," I said. But part of me didn't want to hand it off just yet. Part of me wanted to watch them squirm first. A week later, Linden and Rowe announced a press conference. Gerald Lang was stepping down for health reasons. Harper, the COO, was taking over temporarily. It was damage control. They were cutting off limbs to save the body, but they didn't know the infection had already spread. Because by then, I'd already sent anonymous copies of the recordings to 3 different journalists, and one federal investigator I'd met during Catherine's trial. All I had to do was wait. For the next few days, the world went quiet. Too quiet. Then one night, as I was walking to my car, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street. Engine running, lights off. My pulse spiked. I got in my car, started the ignition, and saw the sedan's headlights flicker on behind me. They followed me for 5 blocks, then 10. I turned left suddenly. They turned left too. My chest tightened. Finally, I pulled into a gas station and parked under the bright lights near the store entrance. The sedan slowed, then drove off. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, shaking. They knew. Someone knew. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a cheap motel outside the city, used a fake name, and left my phone turned off. I couldn't risk them tracking me. The next morning, I drove straight to the federal building and asked to see Detective Marshall. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "Barbara, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you." "Someone's following me," I said, voice trembling. "I have evidence, recordings that prove the Linden and Rowe board knew everything Catherine did. I think they're trying to cover it up again." He motioned for me to sit. "You're safe here. Let me see what you've got." I handed him the second copy of the files. He plugged it in, scrolled through, and his eyes widened. "This," he whispered, "this is huge." Then he looked at me. "You realize this could take down the entire company." "I know," I said softly. "That's the point." Within 48 hours, federal agents raided Linden and Rowe's headquarters. The news exploded. Corporate giants under investigation. Top executives linked to multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Harper resigned. Gerald Lang disappeared on vacation. Every TV channel, every news site was talking about the scandal that started with one woman's fall. Mine. I sat on my couch, watching it unfold, the TV light flickering across my face. It felt surreal. For so long, I'd been powerless, and now the entire company was crumbling. But instead of satisfaction, I felt hollow. Because revenge doesn't fix you. It just clears the wreckage so you can finally see what's left of yourself. A week later, I was called to testify. It was surreal. Sitting in a courtroom, the air thick with tension, lawyers pacing, cameras outside. The prosecutor asked, "Ms. Hayes, what made you decide to come forward?" I took a breath. Because no one else would. Because silence protects the powerful. and I'd already lost everything. I had nothing left to fear. He nodded. And would you say you were seeking justice or revenge? The room went still. I thought about it, really thought about it. Then I said quietly, both. But one led to the other. A murmur rippled through the room. The trial lasted months. Executives were indicted. Catherine's testimony in exchange for leniency confirmed everything. She looked like a ghost, thinner, quieter, her arrogance gone. During one recess, she caught my eye from across the hallway. For a moment, I saw something almost human in her. Regret. Maybe even shame. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. I didn't respond, because forgiveness wasn't mine to give. After the verdict, the court awarded me damages under whistleblower protection, enough to rebuild my life, enough to start fresh. But I didn't go back to corporate work. I couldn't. Instead, I started something new. A small consulting firm, Hayes Integrity Solutions, helping employees who'd been wronged, silenced, or exploited. People like me. We built cases, gathered evidence, and gave voices to those who'd been ignored. And for the first time in a long time, I felt purpose. One evening, a few months later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a quote typed neatly in the center. Justice is not about revenge, it's about balance. Unknown. No signature, but I knew who it was from. Catherine. I didn't know where she was now. Rumor said she'd left the country after serving her sentence. But I didn't need to know, because the story was over. Or at least, my part of it was. Sometimes, when I walk past the old Linden and Rowe building downtown, I stop and look at it. It's been rebranded now. New name, new logo, new leadership. But the foundation is still the same. Cold glass walls, polished lies. People hurry in and out, smiling, shaking hands, pretending everything's fine. And I wonder how many Barbaras still work inside. Overworked, overlooked, thinking loyalty will protect them. It won't. The world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards awareness. And now, I make sure others don't have to learn that the hard way. One night, I was locking up my office when Eli called. His voice sounded lighter than it had in months. "Hey," he said, "you ever think about what would have happened if you just walked away?" I laughed softly. Every day? And? I think I'd still be trying to convince myself that silence equals peace. He chuckled. "You changed everything, Barbara. You know that, right?" "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just turned the lights on in a dark room." We hung up, and I stood there for a while, staring at the city skyline glowing through the window. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was clarity. Months passed. The world moved on. New scandals replaced the old ones. People forgot Catherine Doyle, Linden and Rowe, and even Barbara Hayes. But sometimes, late at night, I'd get an email from a stranger. Someone who'd seen my story. Someone saying, "You gave me courage." And every time I read one, I felt something warm flicker inside me. Not pride, not vengeance, but peace. Because revenge was never the destination. It was just the road I had to take to find myself again. A year after everything ended, I went to the lake, the same spot I used to visit on my lunch breaks when I worked at Linden and Rowe. The city skyline shimmered across the water. The air smelled like rain. I took out a small silver USB stick, the last backup of Catherine's files, and threw it into the water. It sank beneath the surface, vanishing with a quiet ripple. That chapter was gone, and for the first time in years, I smiled, because karma had already done her part, and so had I.